And it sounds trite sometimes, but this is really a topic that's important to me. I really feel, and I tell my students, and I have been doing research on the idea of technology addiction, technology use, and how much do we use it, and how does it impact us. But I tell my students that it really may be how we relate, how they relate to their technology, how we relate to our technology might be the most important decision they make in the 21st century. How we relate to our technology impacts how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about other people, the relationships we have with other people, physically, mentally, and what did I miss out? And productivity at work or at school, or at work or at school, right? So every aspect of our lives is deeply impacted by our relationships with our technology. So let's talk a little bit about that. I've entitled my talk, Too Much of a Good Thing. I think when Derek was introducing me, that is a perfect way to look at technology, right? It's both a gift and a burden at some time. So too much of a good thing. And I wrote a book with that title, but this title tonight is Too Much of a Good Thing. Is your teen addicted to your smartphone? Since we don't have too many teens here today, we're going to turn that lens back onto us, and I'm going to ask, are you addicted to your smartphone? And I think that's an important question, because I'll mention in my talk something called monkey see, monkey do, right? That our students learn a lot by what they see their parents doing. And I'll tell you, it's also very difficult to be a distracted parent, right? To be a parent who's in love with their technology that takes away time. We call it, this is great, it's called displacement hypothesis. It's that when we're on our phones, we're not spending time with our kids. And when we are on our phones, even spending time with our kids, the quality of our interaction with our children isn't as much. And so there's just a lot of problems, and it really starts with us, our own relationships with our technology. Then we can hopefully we can imbue some healthier attitudes and behaviors as it relates to our teens' use of technology. All right, so title of my talk, is your teen addicted to their smartphone? Or too much of a good thing, is your teen addicted to your smartphone? And I usually say this is a good time to power down your smartphone, put them on airplane mode, buckle up your seatbelt, and hold on, because it's going to be a bumpy ride. And what I mean by that is, now I'm getting off script, but that's okay, I do that a lot. But what I mean by that is there is no silver bullet or easy, as you probably all know, solution to this problem. It's a continual battle that we'll continue to battle until we give up, or until I don't know if we ever win, right? We've got adult children who struggle with this same thing as well. So there is no silver bullet. If you're hoping for that tonight, that I was going to give you that one app that was going to solve all your and your team's problems that relate to technology use, you can leave now, because there's just not there. But I think when we start thinking about this and we commit ourselves to helping encourage our teens to have healthier relationships with their technology, I think it's a battle well worth fighting. Okay, so I've got my talk. I suggest you do all that. I have a question for you. You can go to the next slide there. Would you let your teen go out without knowing where he or she was going, who they are going with, and what they would be doing? That's a rhetorical question. I guess not. Then why do you do that very thing when it relates to technology and internet and smartphone use? All right. Smartphone use, as I mentioned at the start, that's why I want to get off script, I get ahead of myself, has been related to teen diminished academic performance, increased anxiety, stress. This is the teens and millennials. Generation Z are some of the most depressed generations we have. A lot of the research suggests it's tied back to technology, problems that can come with that. I did a talk similar to this at the Hippodrome a month or so ago. There was a great documentary called Social Animals about the impact that social media use has on teen healthiness. It scared the life out of me. I mean, I know it's there, but when I see some profound impacts our children and a sense and feeling they're having based upon some of the reactions they get to social media use, it worries me, right? I think that's a real eye-opener how deeply some teens can be troubled by their use of social media and other children's use of social media. So it affects their mental well-being, our physical well-being. When we're on the phones, what aren't we doing? I call it opportunity cost. When we're on our phones, we're not out exercising, or we're not out doing good work, right? So mentally, physically, professionally, and relationally, right? Our relationships with other people are profoundly impacted by our relationships with our technology. One of my favorite little areas, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but has anyone ever heard of the term phubbing? Phubbing, phubbing. That's a portmanteau, putting together two words, phone snubbing. So when Derek asked how many of you had some problems, with technology with your spouses, I only saw a few of you raise your hand, and so either you're just really you're really on the top of that curve, or you're just not telling the truth, right? Because we, hey, why aren't you talking to me? Why are you spending your time there? We call that phubbing. And what we found in a number of studies, and I'm talking about, I do a lot of work with a young lady named Dr. Meredith David at Baylor, and what we found is that when people perceive they're being phubbed, when they perceive their spouse, their significant other is spending more time on their phone, or at least the time they spend together, oftentimes it's distracted by their spouse or significant other's use of their phone, reports higher levels of cell phone conflict, lower levels of relationship satisfaction, and here's the big one. More likely to get divorced, to be unhappy in your relationship, be stressed, anxious, depressed, everything. It's just a bad outcome. And so that all comes from this seemingly innocent piece of technology, which I was going to say, if you don't mind for a second, I'm going to take a... I forgot. I start out with every talk with that, and everyone likes that. And so anyway, I got it now, and I put that on a board, so I have that. So we're here to talk about something that I like to do these talks because, again, we can have an impact, and whether it's, one person or however many people are impacted by it, this is one place where you, as a parent, where you can really make a difference in your child's life, but it won't be an easy battle. All right, so next question. Can we be addicted to behaviors? Yes. Any medical doctors in here? Anything? Really, we've been arguing and struggling with that issue of can behaviors be addictive since the 1970s. If we talk about this thing called the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, it has all these problems that people can have. The only behavior that's in there is gambling behavior. But we've made good arguments on technology addiction, all these other sex, all that kind of stuff should also be in there as addictive behavior. So yeah, the answer is yes. And what is an addictive behavior? We're going to talk about technology addiction, which is a subset of addictive behavior. It's when we compulsively engage in behaviors when they still, despite the negative consequences they have on their well-being. And so we're going to talk about that in a little more detail. But yes, we can be addicted to behaviors, and they can have and by their very definition, they have negative impact on our well-being. Okay, so I have a question for you. How many of you feel your teen may be addicted to their phone? Anybody? Anybody might feel that? All right. Some interesting statistics about smartphone use. I think some of these, it blows me away. We were the first, Dr. David and I did some research about phone use in college students. So this was a number of years ago, and every year, now it's been kind of stabilized. There's not a lot of new uses for our phones that we didn't have a few years ago. But for a while, exponential growth in smartphone use. Dr. David and I found that college students were reporting about 8 hours a day, average, on their smartphone. 8 hours a day. And guess what? Women were spending 10 hours, and men were only spending 7.5. So it averaged to a little over 8 hours a day. And I said to myself, as a scientist, I said, that can't be right. I mean, I work, I'm around college students all the time. I have, at that time, 2 teenage daughters, now young adults. And I said, but what I found is that those numbers were right. And what we found as we learned and found new uses for our smartphones, that in time increased, and so it's really a worrisome trend. But we have seen a little bit of an erosion, a little bit of discussion about, maybe these aren't so good, right? You got to remember this idea that technology could be bad. I mean, there's been arguments about other types of technologies, but about cellular technology, really, we've only been having that discussion for a couple of years when people started to really bring up that maybe our technology, our obsession, our attachment, our addiction to technology might have some negative underpinnings. And I'll tell you a real brief story about that and how big a deal, how high this is hit. And if you watch and pay attention to the news, you already know this, right? Google and Apple have all come out, with new technologies to monitor our phone use and that. And so on that real brief aside, I was sitting in my office. I've been doing this work for a number of years. And who didn't call? I don't say call, talk to me. No, it was an email, and a guy from Google, one of the top guys at Google, and he said, Jim, we want to hire you. First I thought it was a joke, right? I thought someone was talking to me, a joke, and I said, okay, so I went on with that. And I said, oh, sure, and what are you thinking about? He says, well, this is Google, we're very concerned about consumer well-being. So they were interested in bringing me on as the head of a group that would look at consumer well-being, how people were using their smartphones, how that affected their well-being. What I found when I got there, so I went to Mountain View, where they're located, got the tour, did the interviews, that they really didn't have a great idea on how they should approach this idea of consumer well-being. Because it's a little bit of, stepping on their own toes, right? I mean, you're talking about, more measured use of smartphones and stuff like that. It's not necessarily all good for them, even though I think in the long term it might have some positive effect, keeps people and the government from getting in their back pocket. All right, so we did that, and so we'll see how that goes. And they have a lot of researchers who come in and talk about that and study consumer technology use and how it impacts our well-being. But they're worried enough about it that they've got a whole team that is working on attempting to kind of figure this out. How can we make healthier technology? And so we'll talk about some ways that we can at least interact more healthily with our technology as we go. All right, so interesting facts. I got off on the 8 hours, definitely that's down on the bottom, but 150 times a day, that's average. Some people do more than that, some people less. Of course, that's the nature of an average. Every 6 or 7 minutes, 8 hours. And again, the great story about all this, you can read some of those numbers, about how many of you on vacations check your smartphones on a regular basis. I was on a cruise lately, and I liked it that we didn't have Wi-Fi, and I didn't pay for it. But guess what? Most people did. Most people, I've never had been on a cruise before, so we just went on a cruise over spring break, and I would say a good 2/3 of the people were paying somewhere around $60 a day to feed their addiction. To use their smartphone. $65 a day. I waited till we got to ports of call and got the free Wi-Fi and checked with the kids and stuff like that. But we are deeply in love, attached, obsessed, maybe even addicted to our smartphone. So you see those numbers in there. 2/3 of us sleep with our smartphone. I'm going to give you that suggestion. Phones should not be in your children's room when they sleep, no questions asked. They should be charging in the kitchen or someplace where they can. And so, I'm going to say, I'll give you some suggestions like that. And some of them are kind of easy to do. There are things we can do to kind of take away, reclaim a little bit of the land back, the power back from the smartphone, from Apples and Googles and things like that. But it is a continual struggle because your teens are not going to go quietly into the night on this one, right? And especially if they are a little bit down the road already. So we check our phones, a lot of people say they can't live with their phone, can't live without their phones, check them constantly. And then the second to last bullet point before we move on to this one is that, of course, we all are familiar with how phone use and driving is just a bad combination. Those numbers up there are very conservative. I'd say about 30,000 or more people die every year on our roads from technology-related use while driving. And so I go around the country and talk to different states about why are people doing this? Why are people continue to use their phones despite what we know that it's a dangerous practice? And I usually joke if I can get up there and answer in one sentence, it's because we're addicted. Right? We don't have the ability to control our behavior. And then again, it's having a highly negative impact on the safety on our roadways, or these highway safety summits that I like to talk to. And all you got to do is hear one of those people talk about how their daughter or son was killed or killed somebody because of their use of their smartphones while driving, and you'll never do it again. And I know when a lot of us are doing it because I got the statistics that tell us most of us do. But boy, when you hear the pain and suffering that goes with people, parents who've lost their children to their smartphone use while driving, you may sing or whistle a different tune. All right, so is your teen addicted? We can determine that and maybe have a little better insight after we do this next exercise. So to help you better understand what a smartphone addict looks like, I have provided a scale for you to gauge your own smartphone use. So if you would turn to page 2 in your handout, we're going to do a little bit of self-assessment, if you will. And don't worry, I'm not going to collect these or make the scores public. And so just be honest, answer them to as honestly as possible, and we'll see. And I think by looking at this, you'll be able to understand a little bit more about your own smartphone use, which I think is important, but you also get to understand a little bit more about what drives your teens' smartphone use. All right, there are what we call, page 2, and we'll start in a second. You can go to the next slide if you want. Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. There are 6 core components to any addiction. And so when I asked the question about can you be addicted to technology, to your smartphone, the answer is, and I think you'll be more convinced after we go through this little exercise, the answer is unequivocal, yes. When a medical doctor or a psychiatrist looks at someone, examines someone who's coming in saying they're having a problem with prescription drugs or alcohol or cigarettes and they're worried that they might be addicted, they look at these very same core components that we do in assessing technology addiction. So that's a scary deal. These are the same things. So let's look. Let's see if you're addicted to your smartphone. Let's see then what we can do and how we can turn that around to help our teens avoid the same kind of problems we possibly could have. All right, the first of 6 core components is salience. So I'm not going to go through too much of it, but salience means how deeply ingrained is your smartphone use in your everyday life. We're talking about us now, not about our team. So, and salience has to do with some of those statistics I had up there earlier. Is your smartphone the last thing you look at before you go to bed at night? First thing you wake up, oh, it's back up. It might be even something you check while you're up as well, in the night, right? So, do you have it on you all the time? Are you constantly checking, even on vacations and blah, 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 right? We can go forward and along it. So I have 2 questions to ask you that sometimes almost to me seem a little naive after we've gotten so far down the road. I developed a scale a number of years ago. I kind of updated a little bit, but let's ask. And so just answer yes or no to these questions on your sheet. So behavior that's salient is deeply ingrained in our everyday living. First question. The first thing I reach for after waking in the morning is my cell phone. Yes or no? No, this is convicting, isn't it? It's convicting. Do you sleep with your smartphone next to your bed? All right. We may all have good reasons why we do, right? But let's think about that. And if I can kind of in a no, I don't know how you put that, but I used to think, oh, come on. Smartphone first thing you wake up? Well, what we do know is the longer you own your phone, people say that I'm outdated calling them smartphone, that's the way I distinguish it from no one has landlines anymore. Some people do, not that much. But I said, what? Come on, there's got to be more to life than checking your phone. But you know what? The longer, and a psychiatrist friend of mine said, Jim, and I try to walk the walk, right? So I tried to have a flip phone or just a dumb phone, we called it, as long as possible. And Mike finally said, Jim, how can you talk about and really understand the depths of addiction to technology unless you had one yourself? And so I got one a couple years ago, and it works its magic, right? Pretty soon you're finding uses for it that you never thought. You find the one was for me in the morning. My wife, I've got a lot of consciences. My daughters, my wife, and stuff. And it was that, I go in, I'm a diabetic, so I test my blood sugars first thing in the morning, and then before I go to shave or take a shower or whatever, before I do, check my smartphone. So even and who tries to be very vigilant with this, has fallen prey to that. Okay, that's the first component. The second component is euphoria. And this is really an interesting one. I don't think, some of this is so insidious because it kind of sneaks up on us. We're not really thinking about it. And all of a sudden, so much of our pleasure is derived or is embedded in our smartphone. So we're excited to see what emails we got and what funny posts people have made on our Facebook pages or Instagram pages of the wonderful pictures on Pinterest and things like that. And so much of our happiness and our sadness and our disappointments come from our smartphones. So much of it's tied up. So much of our mood, we call it mood enhancement, is tied up in our smartphones. And so that's something we don't kind of notice, but all of a sudden, I really look forward to, and really, kind of interested to see how many people made a comment on my last post, or just I look forward to, the excitement that might come with the smartphone. And what's interesting about this, not everything we get on the smartphone is good news, right? We get upsetting emails and people ignore our posts and things like that. And that's what makes it even all the more addictive, right? It's called intermittent reinforcement, right? We got good stuff all the time. Pretty soon we get bored with that, if you can believe that. But it's that good, bad, good. That intermittent reinforcement that makes smartphones so highly addictive. So, 2 questions. I often use my cell phone when I'm bored. We've done a lot of research looking at that, what the role that boredom plays in our smartphone use. Yes or no? And I have pretended to take calls to avoid awkward social situations, right? No, none of us do that. Okay, so we're all clear on that one. All right, the third core component Remember, and why I'm doing this, keep thinking that I'm talking about technology addiction, because I could be talking about drug addiction right here, or cigarettes, or all kinds of other addictions. We're just talking about technology addiction tonight. All right, tolerance. Do you need an ever-increasing dose of your drug of choice? In this instance, your smartphone, right? And so, do you find yourself using your phone more and more? And of course, research tells us the longer we have them, the more we use them, the more uses we find for them. Again, leveling out a little bit, because really they hit the curve, and worrisome for Apple is that they're starting to place some of their more growth prospects and things other than their smartphone, that's just cataclysmic for them, right? Their growth was tied to iPhone sales for years now, but not anymore until they come up with something that, like the great phones or all the things that we can do now. We've stopped finding kind of new uses, and that's kind of reduced or at least leveled off our use of our smartphones. All right, so tolerance. Answer these two questions. I find myself spending more and more time on my cell phone. Maybe not, maybe. I spend more time than I should on my cell phone. And again, that's up to you to determine, but I think about life a lot in the sense of opportunity cost. What could I be doing if I wasn't spending 2 hours on Facebook or Instagram or Pinterest or, what else?
Working out.
Yeah, there you go. So there's a lot of different places we can spend our time. And I just think about, people who complain about, well, I never have time to exercise, I never have time to spend with my kids and things like that. When we start thinking about, okay, where could that time be coming from? Yeah, the smartphone technology might be a good place to look. All right, the fourth core component of a technology addiction is withdrawal symptoms. And I laugh at this, not because withdrawal symptoms are funny, but because we've done a bunch of studies, both myself and my colleagues and researchers around the world, that we've taken away smartphones and looked at the impact it had, mostly on college students. And the picture is not a pretty one, right? Stress, anxiety, depression, out and out panic. Not just like, oh, I feel a little tingly. No, they're panicking, right? They've quit. Favorite story here was there has been so much problem with smartphone interruption at theater events on Broadway and things like that, and a lot of other types of events. So what they've done was they would have these little mitts, and people put their phones in the mitt, and then and then the mitt locks up, and then they have to get a key to unlock it. And so then throughout the event, things should go well. I kid you not, there's story after story about the people running these events where people had to shelve their smartphone, where they've had people literally look like a dog had chewed on the mitt to try to get their smartphone open because they needed it so bad during the event. So yeah, we're attached. And so withdrawal symptoms, you bet. So the questions I'd ask for you here, I become agitated or irritable when my cell phone is out of sight, right? Maybe even panic. I've never heard anybody yet say, well, I lost my cell phone today. Maybe next week I'll get around to replacing it. It's usually you grab the keys and you're out the door, right? Because that's just not something that we want, prospect that we want to live with. All right, I have gone to a panic when I thought I lost my cell phone. Where is it? I'm going. I can't go anywhere. And I used to laugh when one of the questions I had that I updated the survey or the questionnaire was when it said, if you had left your smartphone at home, would you go back for it? Well, that's a rhetorical question now, right? I don't think anyone's going to go. Even I find myself saying, well, that's a little worrisome not having connection to the internet or to my phone. And so even people who are just really into this, yes, it's hard. All right, so do you exhibit withdrawal symptoms when you're separated from your smartphone, either by choice or not? All right, next core component is conflict. Does our smartphone use cause conflict in our relationship? It could be we've had near accidents or accidents because we're driving. It could be we have fights with our spouses, fights with our children, fights with our employers about our smartphone use. So there's a lot of opportunities for conflict to rear its ugly head because of our smartphone use. I know when I talk to business owners, the one consistent response I get about what's their biggest problem is employees, but related to employees is smartphone use in their employees, right? And we've all probably been in line at stores and people have been distracted by their phones when they should be waiting on us. And so yeah, they cause a lot, potentially can cause a lot of conflict. And that goes back to like my, and our research on phubbing, on phone snubbing. It really can have a very highly negative impact on our relationships. And even again, not just with our romantic partners, but a negative relationship as parents with our teens. Teens, no. Keith, wasn't it you? I know Dr. Richards works with me in the marketing department, and Keith had a great idea about what we should do. And one of my slides should have a picture of a person, looking at their phones with a little person looking up, right? And that would kind of suggest to you what our kids see when we're on our smartphones when we're interacting with them. They're smart. They know about what distracted, divided attention means, and that impacts them, right? That impacts and undermines the quality of relationship you have with them. So the questions: I have argued with my spouse, friends, or family about my smartphone use. I use my smartphone use while driving. All right. I know that's going to be about 70-80% of us. All right. The last core component of smartphone addiction is relapse. And relapse is particularly important. Here's a big word for you. I consider it the sine qua non of smartphone addiction, meaning the essential element is relapse. Have you tried to quit, or cut back, not quit, I don't think quit's even on the table anymore, but try to cut back your smartphone use but then failed? Well, that's really, to me, the essential element of whether you're addicted to your smartphone or not, is if you relapse. And why is that? Because relapse involves first acknowledging that you have a problem and then showing that you don't have control over that problem. So that relapse is really the essential element of smartphone addiction. All right, next slide. So, are you addicted? Let's just see. All right, 8 or more yes, okay, just add up your yes responses. That's all we'll do here. Add up your yes responses, and let's just see. And I do sometimes, as a marketer, kind of change my slides based upon the audience, but I did for tonight. But if 8 or more yeses, you need a reservation at the Betty Ford Clinic for habitual cell phone. I may be pushing it with the age limit. That's a compliment to you. With head Betty Ford, alcohol, and all that stuff. I usually will say with younger groups, I'll talk about the Kim Kardashian, social media addicts clinic or something like that. They can relate much more to that. So 8 or plus yeses out of these 12, you're in there. You're running full speed with that smartphone, and you may need to readjust how you interact. 5 to 7, you've crossed what I call the tipping point. And that tipping point, to steal that term from Malcolm Gladwell, is where, your use of your smartphone, which, as Derek said, there's a lot of good to technology too, right? There's just a lot of things, a lot of benefit. If it was no good at all, some people probably still waste a lot of time with it, but a lot of us would have less problems with it. But it served a very important purpose in a lot of different aspects of our life, right? So it's not altogether a bad thing. It's just that we got to be careful that healthy use of our technology doesn't cross over that tipping point into unhealthy use, interfering with our work, our relationships, our mental and physical well-being. 3 to 4, you've not reached your tipping point and just still got to be careful. 0 to 2, you're either a monk or you're living in a monastery, or you have the self-restraint, and good for you. Good for you, and I laud you for that. Okay, next slide. So what are smartphones, though, doing to our teens' brain? Brains are highly plastic. Meaning they're out, even in our age, they're changing constantly based upon the kind of stimuli they're receiving. And if you're getting a lot of bombardment and quick response and answers like that, that's rewiring our teens' brain. So what I wrote up here is, when we learn something new, we create a new combination of brain cells called neurons. All right? And so the new circuit is created. Pleasurable experience releases something called dopamine, which we call the reward model. It's a good thing. We like it when we get likes to our posts, or we get a fancy or nice email, or Instagram or something like that. The release of this dopamine, though, because it's such a pleasurable experience, reinforces that new brain circuitry. Right? So it's just got to work on itself. The more the brain is used, the more that portion of the brain gets used, that desire for quick feedback and cursory glances and not spending too much time on anything, our teens start to lose, and we do as adults as well, something we call loss of executive function. And executive function is the ability to exercise self-control, to focus. There's a great book that you want to read if you want to go deeper into this subject. A friend of mine wrote it, and what he talked about is the You know, that smartphone is like an attention magnet like no other. Oh, The Shallows. The Shallows. And it talks about the impact, the kind of neurological impact that our smartphones have on our brain chemistry and how our brains work. And it's just what we're doing is, I love you. And so what we're doing is, you know, we're just really teaching our children to, you know, raised our children on a diet of quick and fast, give them a little bit of information, bam, 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 back and forth. And so we start the reliance upon our technology and our smartphones. All right, so use it or lose it, right? The muscles we use become stronger, the ones we don't, the executive functions, we're losing those. Okay, you can go to the next one. Now I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about the science of attention, right? So that's kind of that executive function, our ability to be able to attend to one topic without being distracted or jumping from one topic back to another. So our smartphones, that'll be my sign there. Our smartphones distract us. Think about most time, except for when they kind of cordon themselves off and they're looking at a smartphone without anybody else. We're usually multitasking when we use our smartphone, right? We're usually doing 1, 2, 3, multiple other things while we're using our smartphone. So distraction is, anything that divides our attention. But here's the problem. Multitasking, trying to do more than one thing at a time, is not a skill that we have as human beings. Computers can multitask, we can't. What we do is something called task switching. So we don't do 3 things at once. We're just going back and forth between 2 things altogether. And the problem is that our productivity, our accuracy, all that is negatively impacted by that going back and forth, right? So a lot of times, sometimes it doesn't fall on fertile ground, but I'll say just put down your phone, get your work done, you'll do a better job, you'll get it done faster, and then you can get back to your phone, even though you probably shouldn't use that as a reward, but that's what we're finding. That multitasking has a number of different negative outcomes. It creates what we call cognitive bottlenecks, and that's just a fancy way of saying we're doing so many things at once, and you know what a bottle looks like, right? It's thinner at the top, and these things all come in, and they create a queue because we got to wait, and when we have to wait, it takes longer, we make more mistakes. Think about like the emails and stuff that you've sent. I mean, I just did this, and I was probably working on 3 or 4 things at once, and then I sent an email that someone had already responded to. I sent an email, just so many things going on. You make mistakes and things that you wouldn't do if you're focusing on that particular topic. So these cognitive bottlenecks are a particular problem with smartphones because we usually use them when we're multitasking. All right, so our shrinking attention span, right? We're not getting better, we're getting worse. Has anyone heard about this story? Yeah, this is a great one, and I remember I said the same story at Google, and during my talk, and I was chatting about this, and someone raised their hand. They said, "Dr. Roberts, I'm not sure if that's true." This is about the goldfishes. I said, "Well, we'll just have to go with it. But I think it is, but because it was Microsoft did this big study. But anyways, whether the goldfish is the proper benchmark for this, what we've learned is that our attention spans have dropped dramatically. Our ability to attend to a topic from year 2000, they were 12 seconds. Can you believe that? A third down to 8, or almost a third. 8.5 seconds in what? 15 years. And that's a 3/4 of a second shorter than the garden variety goldfish. So we're just going in the wrong direction. And, it's hard to say specifically that technology is the culprit, but it plays a large role, right? You got to be able to control all that out to be able to say for sure it's technology. But we're seeing, and a lot of people smarter than me who do big scale research are saying that they've kind of tried to parse out everything else, and it's that preoccupation with the smartphone that's leading to these loss of executive function. Okay, so there's 2 types of attention. This is really cool because they're both necessary. And this is what, again, you stole all my good stuff. But there are smart people, the behavioral scientists, decision scientists, psychiatrists, psychologists, and everybody you can think that's involved in how the brain works and decision making who develop this technologies. And so they're very smart people, and it's the same types of people, or they're really the next generation of much smarter people that design the gambling machines, right? In Europe, they call them fruit machines. No one would do that. So they call them fruit machines, right? And now gambling machines, well now we're using our telephones, or they're programming our smartphones to be just like the gambling machines of the 1970s, and we still have them today. And they take advantage of this bottom-up attention. The top-up attention is goal-directed, comes from inside us, and that's the only way we have the ability to get tasks done, by staying on task, right? So we have that, but we've also got, and this is part of who we are, this is how God designed us, we also have the ability to do bottom-up attention. And it's again, the real kind of primordial example of this comes from outside us, from our environment, and the problem is, let's say in the day, it would help us to be able to listen when we're building a fire. Let's really go way back, and you're doing something to subsist for that particular day. We still had an ear out, right? For bad weather, lions, enemies and things like that. So we really need this. We need this bottom up, and so it's these smart men and women, these psychologists, psychiatrists, decision-making scientists, and things like that have taken advantage of this bottom-up attention that we all have naturally to develop, again, technology that, as Nicholas Carr, there I got his name finally, Nicholas Carr said, is the attention magnet like no other. They know and have designed an attention magnet that's going to distract us. I mean, the only way we really, it's sometimes I don't even know if it's better or worse when we make people put away their smartphones, because then they're just really thinking almost more about what they're missing. And funny, Dr. David sent me, and I love this. I'm going to love it. It's kind of disturbing. But as it relates to smartphone use, sent me something. We all, of course, know, and any Texas Tech graduates here? Cliff Kingsbury? Cliff Kingsbury. Now, I don't know how, I'm not going to criticize him. I loved his play as a quarterback in college, but is now the head coach of the Cardinals. Well, okay, why am I talking about this? Just came out that he has incorporated into his team meetings time out for social media breaks. So he said, we can't get anything done unless we give these men and whoever else might be in those team meetings a break so they can check their social media. He certainly didn't check with me on whether that's a good idea or not. And it's not because I have anything against social media, but just think about it. You got 10 minutes, right? You do a half hour, you get 10 minutes, you do another half hour. You get that 10 minutes, and pretty soon, and we'll talk about social media, how deeply that draws us into it, because it's about relationships, and relationships are complicated, right? That's why women spend more time. There's a little trivia question. Why women are more likely to be attached to their smartphones than men is because they use them for different purposes. Women use the smartphone to maintain relationships, which are much more complex. And again, this is a generalization. You always got to be careful with that. But they use them for those reasons, where men use them more for information and entertainment. And so much less depth of use. And so, yeah, we'll find that women are more likely to be attached. And again, in our studies, not always the same average, but about 10 hours for female college students and about 7.5 for male college students. They're just using them for very different purposes. But getting back to this slide, is we need that bottom-up attention, but they've exploited that. They know that about us, and so they've designed technology that will make sure to discourage or to distract us from our goal-directed behavior. All right, so smartphones now. Derek, you go to the next one. All right, and as I just mentioned, it's a good lead-in. I think I know this enough that I know what's coming, but social relationships are very complex. You know how difficult, and they're just complex, they're difficult. And so when we are on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, which one am I always forgetting?
Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter. Yeah, that's good. Texting even is kind of considered social media. What's that? Snapchat. I use it all. No. I use it once a day. Once a day, I take a picture with a funny filter with my face, and I send it to my daughters. That's it. And so that's all I do. So, yeah, I don't know how I forget Snapchat all the time. But the point is that when we're using social media, it sucks us in deep, because relationships are that complex. Right? Oh, did I say something that could offend them? Or, oh, do they like that picture? And so it takes so much working memory that we just don't have a lot of space left for anything else. That's social media, and that's why it is such a sink. But you know what?
That's the insidious nature of this as well, though. It's because relationships are so important that social media is so addictive, right? So it's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we are, as human beings, designed, and we thrive and live longer when we have healthy relationships. And so the people who are designing our technologies know that and use that to their advantage. Okay. So some fun facts about students and learning and things like that. Most students say they can't study without, 73%, without technology. 38% can't last 10 minutes. And that might even be conservative. 90% use technology in the classroom, 11 times per class. And 62% though said it was distracting, despite all that. And I love this picture. I think you can see it as in a classroom, and not one of those laptops is looking at what's going on in front. It's all, and they did even stuff like, you've probably seen the ones like pictures of in Congress, and they have all these guys and gals with their lap, and they're watching TV, they're doing whatever they might be doing, and not paying attention to what's going on. I'm not sure. I know Midway kind of waffles. Because my daughters both went through the Midway school system, and it almost left up to the individual teacher, about what and how they use technology. It might have changed now. My youngest has been out for 3 years, but it really kind of sending a mixed message. Get your work done. You could use your smartphone at the end of class. Well, that's not working out, or that's not a real good logic behind that kind of stuff. So yeah. We got to be careful. But I know what's going on in college campuses, and and everyone to varying degrees. But I know I haven't allowed any technology. I'm not talking smartphones. Smartphones have never been something I'd allow in class. But even laptops. Laptops are worse. If I had to choose, I'd let them have their smartphone before I'd have them have their laptop. Bigger screen. Other people get involved in it. Yeah, all this is work. So, and I learned this from a colleague, and I've been studying this for years. But I finally just said, I can't have it anymore. I can't take it anymore. I cannot compete with my students' smartphones for their attention. I'm just not that interested. And so anyway, so I just said, I'm not going to, and it's working. It's working. You know what? It's not working. It's working beautifully. I now have what I guess what I at least imagined I had years ago. Students are writing notes. They actually, you can see they're leaning forward. Not all of them, right? Still got one sleeping once in a while. And then writing things down as I talk. And that was not the case. When it was never like I encouraged smartphone use, but I wasn't adamant about that. They'd be off and they're all under the desk, and I still get 1 or 2 a day. First I start out class, I say, power down, we're going old school, right? And they all turn them off, and it has really just been a transformational experience. And I tell the story about how when I used to teach 15 years ago, the biggest challenge I had was getting my students, when I came into class, was getting my students to be quiet and get back to their seat. Now the biggest job I have is get them to get their face out of their smartphones and say hi to the person next to them, right? So I go in now, and it's like a morgue. There'll be students that don't even know the person who sat next to them at the end of the semester. It's like, wow, we're missing out a lot. And so it's just opened up. I mean, so it's worked better than I even thought it would. There are no technology-free zone. And again, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this when I give suggestions about working with your team. I tell them, okay, I've got that power, at least in that 1 hour and 15 minutes to do that, but I also try to rationalize with them why we do that. And I've got some articles on our Canvas page, Blackboard, whatever people use. We all use Canvas. There are articles that have looked at research that shows that people who take notes by hand do better and learn deeper than people who take notes on their laptops. And really quickly, why that is because when we're on our laptops, we're better typers than we are writers, and so we dictate. And so there's really no learning going on. But we're slower as writers, and so when we write, we have to synthesize what's being said, and so of course, that's part of the learning process. Right, so it's amazing. So anyway, the point there is, with a number of other articles as well about distraction and things like that, which I think they believe in, is that you've got to reason with your team about why you're asking them to do the things that you do. Because again, like I started off the talk, and I always tell my students when they do public speaking not to start out with, okay, I'm not going to save or cure all your ills, but it's just the truth. I'm not going to cure all your ills. I don't have the one app that you're going to put on your phone and hook it up to your kid's phone and you're going to solve all your problems. there is not such an app like that. And so just talk about what you need to do. I've got some hopefully helpful suggestions coming up. Okay, go ahead, Derek. All right, so this is what we don't want. Multitasking is a bad thing. It slows us down. We make more mistakes. It's just not something that's good for us. All right, so next slide. Let's just look at really briefly. I really get to the suggestions in a second. But we found that technology and technology use while studying or in the classroom has devastating impacts on student learning, right? That shouldn't hardly be a surprise, right? When we're distracted, when we're multitasking, we're not learning as deeply as when we're paying attention. As a matter of fact, I told my wife that at dinner tonight. I said, and we all have this, right? Where our life just gets to the point where it's just so busy, and what do we see when we're just so busy? Not only are we stressed, anxious, and depressed, but we're also not doing an optimal job on any of the projects that we're working on. That's where I'm at right now. Just kind of like, okay, we just got to simplify things, and so we got to teach our students to look at things that way as well. So when we're distracted by Facebook or any other social media while we're studying or learning, it leads to lower academic performance. Go ahead, Derek. Two really interesting social media learning experiences. First one, and it kind of teaches the same thing. We did an experiment. Students watched a 20-minute video while using Facebook, texting, or email. The control group didn't watch. They watched the video without any of these distractions, and surprise, surprise, social media users scored lower on tests of lecture material. Just can't do both at once. One's going to have to suffer at the expense of the other, and it's usually because of the depth of social media, it's our learning that goes on. The second one, and this is interesting as well, it just shows that from group to group to group, watch the 30-minute video lecture again, and the more text, the more negatively impacted was our learning. And so learned an entire grade level lower for the group 3 compared to group 1. So technology distracts us, we can't multitask, and so we've got to design an environment and encourage the types of behaviors that discourage multitasking. Go ahead, Jack. All right, lots of studies. I mean, this is not one, two. This is a burgeoning area of research because, and that's again why Google and Apple are so interested in, and they come up with their new monitoring apps, and they're talking a good game about, really looking after and really concerned about consumer well-being because, finally the media and all of us are saying what we've known for a number of years now is that it's both too much of a good thing. It's both a good thing and it's a bad thing. And so they're kind of catching up, but they've got they got kind of a conflict of interest, if you will. So we're humans, we can't multitask. Doing anything else while we're trying to do something of importance is going to distract and it's going to undermine our productivity and the quality of work that we do. Go ahead. All right, so what can we do as parents to try to even the playing field? I use this a metaphor, I guess it's a metaphor of the Dutch and trying to reclaim their land from the sea, and we just do it one little bit by a time. And so if we went down that road, and our kids are, and again, a lot of ours are. I'm not going to hold up my kids as, they've heard the story for a long time, and yet they still, I think, use their smartphones. I'm not really. One uses too much, I won't say who. The other one, I think, is more reasonable on their use. And it's like, well, I tell Keith before we talked, and I'm always certainly willing to point the finger at myself, is that, so my daughters were old enough at the point that they got texting phones, right? And so 1 month, when I think my daughter had a new boyfriend, 10,000 texts in a month. So we got that report. Well, we need to look at this, right? But that's part of being a parent. At least we paid attention enough to know. I don't know how we missed that she was set at 10,000, but we paid enough attention to the bill that we said, okay, something needs to be done. That's not good. And so, all right. So what do we need to do? Because again, there is no silver bullet. We really need to work with our teens in kind of a. And it's hard sometimes with teens, but we really got to treat them like adults in the sense we can say we're in this together, and if we're going to come to some kind of healthy relationship with our technology, it's going to require input and discourse between the two. It's not a top-down thing. It's just not going to work. When I was at Google, they asked me if there's one thing I could do. If I came to work for them, if there's one thing I could do, I go, okay, there's a lot of things we need to address as far as consumer well-being, but if there's one thing I could do, what would I do? I didn't have to hesitate. I said, Google needs, Apple needs to be taking the lead on blocking the access to pornography on the internet. So that's it. If I came here and did only that, I would die a happy man because of how profoundly that exposure to pornography, most for young men, impacts how they see females. It just makes me almost cry. And so, and you may notice this, and we noticed this with our daughters, that they were both on the Midway dance team. And, you know, good kids, and, they're all, dressed up and things like that. But we're noticing, and I said to myself before I put 2 and 2 together, was, God, it was homecoming. And about a quarter of them had dates. These were smart, fun girls. I said, what's going on? And then, the more I looked into it, what I found was that men, at that age were just kind of good news. They're having less sex, but they're also dating less because of access to pornography. And so and it all started to make sense to me that, they didn't have a need to date and go out. And so it was just dramatic. And I just kind of go, that was it. If we could cure that, if we could ask Google to do one thing, it would be to do that. And so that's a conversation we need to have, a little bit with the daughter, but mostly with our sons, to say, that is, it's dehumanizing for women. It's, it's something that you shouldn't do. But again, if I could give you an app, and I can tell you 10 apps that will potentially block pornography on your children's smartphones, but it won't work. They'll find ways around it, or what will they do? They'll use their friend's smartphone. They'll use their friend's laptop. And so it's got to be internally driven. It's got to come from your kid that I don't want to see that because that's not right. If you think you're going to be able to block it and get them to do it by watching every minute of what they do, we will fail. We need to have open relationships and open discussions with our children about this. So create rules with your teens' input. I need to foster a sense of trust. And I go, of course, again, I'm dating myself again about trust yet verify, a la Ronald Reagan, right? We got to trust them, but it never hurts. Have the monitoring device, and maybe if you can, at a weak moment, get them to allow you to put the tracking on their phone, and that works good. We still use that on one of my adult daughters, and again, it's just, hey, we need to know she goes on her own. She's an adult, and by herself, and that's a scary thing, and so we want to kind of have some, kind of tangential understanding of where she is. And so we got to work with that. We can't, this is not a top-down mandate. Here's the tough one. There's a lot of tough ones. But number 3, set a good example. Monkey see, monkey do. More is caught than taught. And we learn a lot, or our children learn a lot from modeling what they see at home, right? And so we got to first look closer to home before we expect our children to not use their phones when they drive, or our children not to use phones while we're having dinner together, or when we're together on a date or family day and things like that. So think about that. That's really a good way to start the conversation. Set clear boundaries and limits. And so I'm going to address a couple of these. First thing, of course, big bold letters, and after you've been through again a couple of those highway safety stuff, no smartphone use while driving. Even, I hate to say it, and I can show you study after study, that even hands-free impedes our progress. And that's my daughter's deal, and she calls her mom and me every night when she's driving. Can you imagine? I'm giving this talk, and every night my daughter is calling home to talk to us on her phone while she's driving. I gotta go, no, that's not what you're supposed to do. But anyway, it's even hands-free. That's the first argument I get whenever we do talks and things like that. Someone says, well, I use the hands-free. But they're both having conversations and driving are both mental activities. One has to give to do the other. It's usually going to be the immediacy of the person on the phone and not your driver. All right, so that's the best thing you can do. If it means throwing your phone in your trunk because you're weak, great. And that's it. Like Kai and I'm not a English lit major, but the guy who tied himself to the mast so he wouldn't listen to the sirens call and drowned in the... Who is that? Anyway, so the whole idea is, you got to do it. This is what's called this is Psychology 101, environmental and behavioral programming. Environmental programming means setting up or creating an environment that helps your team become successful. Helps them successfully navigate their relationship with technology. And then behavioral has to do with rewarding the desired behaviors, right? So that's really what it's all about, behavioral and environmental programs. No smartphones in the bedroom, gave me that one. Leave them in the kitchen, you know, it's just the problems that can occur from unfettered use of the smartphone are scary, and particularly at night, because not only that's when, you know, when kind of things get crazy on social media, but it also blocks our, you know, inhibits our children's good night's sleep, right? And man, you know, the whole day starts with a good night's sleep. If your kid's been up 3 or 4 times, you know, and, you know, maybe upset, right, about what things that always come out ugly at night, yeah, they're interrupting their REM sleep, their good sleep, and that can really have a negative impact. That's what leads to stress, anxiety, and depression, that lack of sleep that we get from our use of social media at night. And we're doing a couple studies about that right now. No smartphones during family time, during dinner. Dinner is a particularly important family time. You know, again, so much of us are running to place, but research, study after research has found that families that eat together are happier and they have better relationships, and that's an important part of getting this to work, encouraging healthier smartphone use is having that family time. Because it's just like we know at church on Sundays or whenever you have meals, it's just, you know, people just let their guard down, right? And they just relax and they talk, and that's just not a time that, a lot of time, like we don't have a lot of time like that anymore. And so family time, you can have a meal time, that's particularly important. And then of course you don't want to encourage, you want to discourage smartphone use during the meal time. You know, you've seen Chick-fil-A has little things you can put them in there, and yeah, there's a lot of little things you can do. But yeah, so anyway, there you go. Don't use them at smart time. No screen time during homework, you know, even though, you know, I thought that one of the worst ideas Midway ever made was when they gave all the students the iPads, and all that. They found ways to get around the different, you know, restrictions and stuff. And it was just a bad idea. They need to sometimes just put pen to paper and, you know, kind of go old school. No smartphones before school. That just sets them off thinking about other things. No smartphones immediately before bed. Schedule regular exercise time, because it really is something, that's one of the things that can give kind of easily if people don't understand it, is they're just not getting out, not learning how to ride bikes. They're not getting outside because they're spending so much time on their smartphones. I remember I had a colleague, friend, maybe family member, that was talking about that her son was playing tennis. Well, that's great. Tommy needs to get out and get exercise, right? That's good for all of us. Well, she was referring to Wii tennis. And so, well, you know, okay, not so good, I guess. Better than maybe being on social media, but not quite. All right. Put it in writing, number H there, and that's kind of an old saw we use in psychology called social contracts. Put it in writing. Tell your student, this is the kind of behavior we expect. Here's the kind of rewards or punishments you'll get for keeping or not, for violating that. And it's just good to kind of get it in writing because it's clear, they understand, you know, what's expected of them. There's no, oh, you didn't say that, oh, I didn't change that. So yeah, and it forces you to kind of think through to what are with their input, what are the kind of restrictions and what you're going to allow and things like that. So putting it in writing, we've worked that for years. I is hair of the dog. What do I mean by that? Using technology against itself. And so what that means is we can use, and we all know now, a little bit more available now with kind of Google and Apple trying to kind of right the ship a little bit, that we can monitor our students' smartphone use. And one of my favorite examples of that, there's a lot of different ones, Moments and the Phone Addict for the Android, and there's a lot of different ones. And now there's just ones that come on the phone that are interesting, and you can get through the battery setting, not just how much, battery doesn't really make a difference, but you can see how much time they spend on each of these as well. And that's a way you can kind of set limits. It's only so much time on Facebook and things like that. And I think that's good. It's a little external, but the hair of the dog would be just that, using technology against itself. I think the example I was going to share was something I call high-tech shaming. And so what you can do by that, let's just say it's your spouse and you're complaining about your husband or wife spending too much time on social media. You can have their social media time sent directly to you. And so then you could get, an idea of how, so it's just, just ways like to hold each other accountable, right? We know, and, again, you have to work out how that works in your relationship. Could be, long shot, all right. Hair of the dog. Next, monkey see, monkey do, right? Preview games and set clear limits. Gaming is a real problem for, especially for boys, but now I'm hearing 20, 30% girls, kind of involved and maybe too deeply involved in gaming. Blaine McCormick, who used to be the Dean for Undergraduate Studies at Baylor said more boys were being dropped out or dropping out of school because of gaming use than drugs and alcohol. It wasn't drugs and alcohol anymore. It was Fortnite. I'm pointing to Keith because we have talks about kid use and things like that. But actually, and we'll say what time we have, what I think I'm going to do when we do have some time, I might ask Keith to say how he manages, and let him share with you how he manages children's use of technology. I think it's really creative and I think it's really effective. And so I love that. I just love that idea. You're battling. This is a battle, and we got to know, who we're up against and what we can do to kind of win the battle if there's such a thing. Remind teens to limit their use and explain why. Maybe it's just, you wanted to learn how to paint, or you wanted to be on the basketball team. Well, you got to practice, and that means